Hi, I'm General Booty. I'm the quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, and you are now tuned into the greatest podcast on turf. Enjoy.
What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to this week's first full episode of the greatest podcast on turf. I'm Anthony.
I'm Ryan.
And today we are back with our Week 2 fantasy football stardom sit-em. Last week there was some hits or misses, but this week on the bright side, Ryan and I were on the same page about a lot of these guys. So you know what they say, 2 minds is better than 1.
Yeah, us being together, I don't know if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing, but
if it doesn't work out, we just might need to find another hobby.
If it doesn't work out, we're translating to something. We're
going to start a lifestyle podcast and just tell stories all day, which I think would be really good, actually. We're fucking funny. But yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, be on the lookout for our Best Bets episode dropping tomorrow. As always, check out our sponsor, My Family's Business, Little Italy Pizza Shop. If you go in and show proof you're subscribed, you are eligible for a major discount. And if I'm there personally, I will buy your food, 100% guarantee. With that being said, stardom quarterback this week. Who do you got?
I think this guy, I sat him last week just because I wanted to see. To see it. Now I saw it, and now I'm all in. Yeah. Anthony Richardson going up against Houston. Houston did all right against Lamar last week, but Lamar shot himself in the foot more times than not. Anthony Richardson is healthy already. It's Wednesday, and he's not on the injury report, so I would say he's fully ready to go. He said from the jump that he's fine. Anthony Richardson is a guy who he rushed the ball for 10 times for 40 yards and a rush touchdown. As a quarterback in fantasy football, that is amazing. That is all you need. That is the best floor that you could possibly get. Anthony Richardson, I would rather start him than both of our sit-ems for sure.
Yeah, I would probably start him over my stardom too.
Probably, yes, I would. Anthony Richardson is a guy who he is quickly, getting closer and closer to being at the back end of the QB1 tier. So if you ended up with, Dak Prescott on your team and Anthony Richardson's out there, which he shouldn't be, I would start Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. And my stardom quarterback this week, honestly, I don't know how I feel about it. This week was tough to figure out a stardom quarterback. Just because some of the I thought about Jordan Love, but Atlanta's defense is tough and we don't know what he can do against a good defense. Thought about Baker, but then again, he's playing Chicago. We don't know if they're just bad or if they were just bad last week or the Packers are really good.
Baker would have been bold.
I mean, I don't hate if you start Baker this week.
I would respect
Threw 200 yards, was dotting them up, figured out the Vikings' defensive signals, and just worked around it. I think he's back. Start Baker this week. Sleeper start of the week, Baker Mayfield. But my other more safe stardom quarterback this week, Jared Goff. I don't even know if I would want to call it safe. It's their home opener, and they're playing against Seattle, who just got exposed by Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell, and Matthew Stafford, who didn't play football at all last year, pretty much. So, in theory, Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs should go out there and thrive, I feel like. Especially because the Rams have no offensive line, and Seattle still couldn't do anything. And especially with all that capital in the secondary getting dotted up by Puka and Tutu Atwell is a problem. What a receiving core name thing. Tutu and Puka.
That's really good.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, again, if you have a guy who we're about to touch on we have 2 or 3 sit-em quarterbacks this week. If you have one of our sit-em guys, I would confidently say start Jared Goff, Anthony Richardson, and even Baker Mayfield this week over them guys. Or another guy who I've seen picked up and getting a lot of traction in even our leagues, Jordan Love. Again, that's a test for Jordan Love this week just because we don't know if Atlanta's defense, if we don't know if he's actually good and just beat up on a really bad Bears defense or if he's actually good.
Yeah.
So with that being said, moving on to our sit-em quarterbacks this week.
Dak Prescott, hurts me to say. Week 1, Dak Prescott didn't do anything for fantasy purposes. Granted, that game was not set up for fantasy purposes.
I just figured out another bet that I want.
Fair enough. Just because, they destroyed him. And Dak only had to throw the ball so many times and only had to score so many points.
Yeah.
However, this week he's playing against a Jets team that just lost Aaron Rodgers. They just beat the Bills on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And they're built through the defense. And if they're going to be an even more run-centric approach now that they don't have a quarterback. So I think this game is going to be a low-scoring game. The over-under is the lowest of the week at like 39. I don't think either of these teams do much on offense. I don't see Dak putting up that good of numbers against his defense. This feels like a kind of low-scoring. I think Dallas dominates, but I don't think there's much offense here.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a battle between arguably the two of the top defenses in the NFL this week. Yep. We saw what the Jets just went out and did versus Buffalo a couple nights ago now, and they did that against a fully healthy Buffalo team. Imagine what they're going to do against Dak Prescott, who's not as good as Josh Allen, probably. An offensive line that's healthy for now, right? They're healthy. And a team with a banged-up Brandon Cooks. You really don't know what you're going to get this week. I like sitting Dak this week. But even more, for tonight's game, you're sitting Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. Say what you want about my reasoning. But he got beat up on and exposed by Philly last year. He didn't do that good against Tampa Bay. And Kirk Cousins is notorious for not showing up during primetime games. It's literally as simple as that. If you start Kirk Cousins this week, I'm sorry to hear that again. I would confidently start Jared Goff, Ant Rich, if they're available, which Anthony Richardson probably shouldn't be, but Jared Goff is probably available in your leagues. Start him over Kirk Cousins this week. You'll be thanking me tonight when the game's over. The Eagles' defense exposed him last week. Yeah, the Eagles are thin at linebacker right now. But that's about it. It's pretty much the same D-line that's got upgraded from last year. Same secondary. James Bradbury's got a concussion. I'm not reading too much into that. Sit Kirk Cousins this week.
Jumping over to the stardom running back side, my first guy I'd like to mention is Anthony Richardson's on my screen. David Montgomery.
From my angle right here, that looks like it says Devin Singletary, and I was just so lost.
I would never do such a thing.
I was going to say.
David Montgomery is a guy who last week against Kansas City, he had 21 rush attempts for 74 yards and a rush touchdown. Granted, Jahmyr Gibbs did look good, arguably looked better. I don't think that David Montgomery loses his role of what he has done. I don't think David Montgomery looked bad either. David Montgomery is a better pass blocker than Jahmyr Gibbs, and he runs in the tackles. He's the bruiser. He has the weight. He has the experience. He is the guy that will be getting touches inside the tackles. And what that translates to is obviously red zone touchdowns. So going up against the Seattle defense that just let Kyron Williams absolutely destroy him, basically anybody destroy him, the Lions in theory should score a lot of points. I think Seattle also can score a lot of points. This game, good chance it goes over. And I think David Montgomery will get a touchdown this week, so he's a start for me.
Yeah, no, I like that one a lot. My first stardom running back this week, it is James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. Bills are coming off a tough loss to the Jets on Monday night, but James Cook, say what you want, he got the ball a lot. He had 12 rushes for 46 yards, got held, it was tough, but he had 6 targets. I mean, this guy, they're making it very clear that he is going to be a focal point of this offense. He's arguably right now the second option behind Stephon Diggs in the offense. Kincaid was all right. Dawson Knox was still getting snaps for whatever reason, and Gabe Davis had 30 yards on 3 catches. I mean, it's clear that James Cook is going to be a huge part of this Bills offense. And you got a pissed-off Buffalo Bills in their home opener against the Vegas Raiders with a very questionable run defense that Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine both scored over double-digit fantasy points against last week, and the Broncos lost. I don't think the Raiders' defense is very good. I don't think they made enough additions to it. And you got a pissed-off Bills team that's going to look to come out here and get a statement win and show that they're not falling off and that they are still as good as they've always been against the Raiders this week with a very weak defense. So I think you can start James Cook this week confidently.
My next stardom running back this week, it might be a little bit too obvious, but it's Ramondre Stevenson going up against Miami. I think people are starting to write off Ramondre Stevenson in that, Zeke's going to take over a good chunk of the load and Ramondre's not going to finish as like a top 10 running back, but I still think he will. Ramondre last week, he got the ball 18 times, 6 of those were catches, and he does really good in the receiving work. But all during the week, he was questionable with the illness, and I know, illness isn't an injury, and he was fine, but, I don't know what the illness is, but that could, in theory, it could impact you for your game on Sunday. I mean, you could be a little bit dehydrated, you could be restless, and they could have just, gave the ball to Zeke a little bit more because, like I said, Ramondre Stevenson wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
But even though he wasn't 100%, he still went up against a Philly defense and hung up 14.9 fantasy points. That's a PPR league, but I mean, still 6 receptions, still very solid. And now he's going up against a Miami defense that just allowed a ton of points to Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly. So if you were worried about Zeke, in theory, they're both going to do good against Miami. And I'm not too worried about Zeke, so I think Ramondre Stevenson is the guy, and I think he balls out this week.
No, not at all. My next stardom running back this week, Jamal Williams of the New Orleans Saints. Yes, he only scored 7 fantasy points last week, but it was against the Houston Texans. It was against the Tennessee Titans defense that is always pretty good against the run. But if you look at it, Kendre Miller was not there last weekend, and Jamal Williams was the only running back that got any production. He was out running routes. He was running the ball. He had 18 rushing attempts in a very tight game. He had 2 targets, caught both of them. I mean, it seems as though while Alvin Kamara is out, Jamal Williams is going to be the guy. And he's going up against the Carolina Panthers defense this week that really just got ran all over by Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So I don't see the Panthers really coming out here and stopping Jamal Williams against what, for the most part, is a good Saints offensive line, except Trevor Penning. That guy is the worst football player in the NFL. But, yeah, I'm confidently starting Jamal Williams this week. I think he's in for a big bounce-back week this week against Carolina on Monday night.
I think Dwayne Brown would like a word.
Dwayne Brown? Yeah. What the hell is his name?
Donovan Smith?
Yes, Donovan Smith. It was so hard to watch him block last year.
Next up, jumping over to the sit-em side. My first sit-em is Alexander Madison going up against Philly. I don't know if we're kicking the dog by taking all these Vikings players, but I'm going to continue to do it. Alexander Madison, he did all right week 1 against Tampa. Tampa has always had a pretty good run defense. However, I mean, I was kind of saved by the touchdown. He only got the ball 14 times. And now he's going up against a Philly defense that, or not Philly, Philly defense that didn't look the best week 1. And I genuinely think they're going to roll. The Vikings ruled out their center and left tackle? Center and right tackle?
Yeah.
They ruled out 2 starting offensive linemen. And I got a feeling Philly's just going to destroy them.
Yeah.
Was Philly home last week? They were in New England.
They were in New England, yeah.
So it's a Philly home opener at night. I want no parts of any Minnesota Vikings that aren't Justin Jefferson. You have to start TJ Hawkinson, but you're probably not going to be happy about that either.
Yeah. My first and only sit-em running back of the week, Cam Akers. This is probably kicking the dog. But he ran the ball 22 times and had 29 yards. The only thing that saved him last week is that he scored a touchdown. And Kyron Williams had 2. It's a weird situation, and they're playing against the 49ers, who just held Najee Harris and Jalen Warren to literally nothing. And they blew him out, so Najee only had 8 carries the whole game.
6. But yeah.
6.
And 2 receptions, so 8 touches.
8 touches total.
Good shit.
I mean, this has all the makings to just be another classic 49ers whooping. I mean, the Rams have nothing going for them on the offensive line. Cam Akers couldn't produce anything on 22 touches last week. So I can only imagine what he's going to produce this week against the 49ers, who arguably have the best defensive line in football. So with that being said, sit Cam Akers this week.
My next sit-em running back guy we said last week, guy I'm going to say a lot this year, Najee Harris going up against Cleveland. Cleveland has a great defense, a great defensive line, and this game screams low-scoring football game, which does solidify Najee Harris to get a good chunk of touches. However, Jalen Warren is there, and Jalen Warren will get touches. I think Najee Harris will be the starter for the entire year. They did draft that high draft capital in him, but I do think we see Jalen Warren, he's going to get involved. And I don't think I want any parts of Najee Harris against good defenses this year. So he is my final sit-em running back.
Yeah, moving on to the stardom receivers this week. I had 3 stardom and 3. I had 5 sit-em receivers, but you had 2 of them. I had. All right. So for this first receiving core, you're starting of the week. I'm saying start the Tampa Bay Buccaneers receivers, and by that I mean Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. They both had around 10 targets last week. They both did really good in the passing game. Baker threw the ball well. Mike Evans got in the end zone once, I believe, as well. Going up against a Bears defense that just really looked all out of whack last week against Green Bay.
Dobbs had 2 touchdowns on him.
Dobbs had 2 tutties. Jaden Reed had 50 yards, who's a rookie with minimal relationship with Jordan Love because he didn't really work with the first team all offseason.
Aaron Jones killed him in the receiving game.
Yeah, this has all the makings for Tampa to start 2-0.
They're back.
Baker. What a replacement. Two of my favorite players ever.
Just be a Tampa fan already.
I'm thinking Jacksonville, but that's a topic for later. But yeah, I would say you can. It was tough last week because you really didn't know which version of the Bucs you were going to see and which Baker you're going to see. But confidently speaking, they're at home. They're playing against the Bears, who got exposed last week on defense and offense. The Bears sucked last week, and I don't see them just all of a sudden getting pissed off and going out there and becoming the perfect Bears that I thought we were going to see this year. So go ahead and start Mike Evans and Chris Godwin this week.
My first stardom receiver this week, in no order, but I want to talk about this guy first. Puka Nacua going up against the 49ers. Hey. We talked about him on the waiver episode, so go check that out just in case any of those guys are still out there. But Puka is a guy going up against the Niners defense that is very good. I'm not going to argue it. However, if you're in a PPR league, if you're in a league where you can start 3 receivers, I feel like Puka Nacua there's a really good chance he's one of those receivers you got to start this week.
Yeah.
I know the Niners matchup isn't good. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. However, Puka Nacua is a guy that's going to get the ball thrown to him a lot of times, and when you get the ball thrown to you a lot, you're going to obviously put up points, especially in those PPR type leagues. I think Puka is a guy who he could be a guy that could be a starter on your team for the whole entire year. Even if Cooper Kupp comes back to the normal Cooper Kupp, we could see a Robert Woods role from him, which, obviously is a hit, but could still be starter value there. Puka Nacua is a guy who, even if he does bad against the Niners, I would still hold on to him. And even possibly trade for him if he does bad against the Niners.
Yeah, my last stardom wide receiver this week, Elijah Moore of the Cleveland Browns. I know last week he only had 9 points, but if you look at the stat sheet, he was involved a lot. He had 2 rushes for 20 yards. He had 7 targets and recorded 43 yards. 7 targets is a lot, I feel like, especially in a game where it's a tighter game and then you take a giant lead. And to get 7 targets in the rain, that's solid for a guy that just joined the team in the offseason. Elijah Moore was my guy for a reason. I knew he was going to be a focal point in this offense. And they're going up against Pittsburgh that kind of just got torched by Debo and Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore, yes, he's the receiver too, to Amari Cooper. But I still see him having a big part this week against the Steelers. So, he's only rostered in 72% of Yahoo leagues, so if he's out there, go pick him up and start him. I didn't realize he wasn't rostered a little bit higher than that. But yeah, if Elijah Moore is available in your league, pick him up and start him over one of the next 7 guys we're about to tell you about.
Yeah, Watson's the kind of guy that should love the multiple receivers, so
yeah,
even though he's the number 2. My next stardom wide receiver this week, kind of obvious. I was kind of struggling a little bit here. Brandon Ayuk going up against the Rams.
Yeah.
DK did all right against the Rams. Lockett didn't do too much. JSN didn't do too much. I think that game was a little bit of a fluke. I think Seattle next time will score a lot more points on them. They didn't do anything literally at all in the second half. I don't think that happens again. I think the Niners, they're going to score points. And Brandon Ayuk is the best receiver on this team, and that's starting to be widely known. He's the second best weapon on this team behind Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
And this is one of the best offenses in football. So you're probably starting Brandon Ayuk for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to say my piece.
Yeah. And for the sit-em receivers, how many did you have?
2.
Okay, so we have 5 sit-em receivers this week. The first one, this is kind of tough because this guy, you have a lot of capital, and there's a good chance you drafted this guy at the end of the first round or the early to mid-second round of your fantasy drafts. But it's Garrett Wilson. Again, it's a tough situation because this guy was definitely one of your top 2 picks in your fantasy draft. But it's Zach Wilson's throwing him the ball now, and they're going up against a Cowboys defense who's one of the best in the NFL. Now, if you do sit Garrett Wilson, I get it. And I'm sitting Garrett Wilson in the league I have him in. But if you start him, I also get it too, just because you have so much capital invested in him, and to the point where it's like, okay, where's the line of this is getting too cute now? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I would say if you have a viable option, like if you have an Elijah Moore sitting on the bench, start Garrett Wilson. But if you're looking at a whole lot of mid on your fantasy receiver bench, then it raises the question, how cute are we getting right now?
Yeah, my first sit-em receiver this week, it is George Pickens going up against the Browns. Me and Anthony said George Pickens, so I'll give him a little bit of love there. He did all right week 1 in PPR terms. He had 7 targets, 5 catches, about 40 yards. However, I don't trust the Steelers' offense that much. Going up against a Cleveland defense that is really, really good, once again. I know that Deontay Johnson's out, so that does help George Pickens.
Technically, he's still doubtful.
He's probably out, so that does help George Pickens. But it also just decreases the value of this offense in general. It hurts them more and more. It's getting darker and darker in terms of them scoring points. They're going to have to... Against Cleveland, I'm not sure what they're going to do, honestly. I mean, it's Kenny Pickett's going to have to lead the team with only George Pickens, 30-year-old Allen Robinson,
who led the team in receiving yards.
Team in receiving yards. Who
not too shabby.
Can pick him up if he's out there. It's not luxurious, but you can do it. I did it in one of my leagues, but
you got him in a dynasty league.
Yeah.
I was pissed. Somebody outbid me.
No, I didn't. I put in for him, but I didn't get him.
Somebody outbid me for Justice Hill by $2.
No, they got him for 22.
I bet 20.
Oh, you put in 20?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't trust George Pickens. I got to see it first. He's in that tier for me where, if I get burned by him, I get burned by him. But I'm not starting this guy against Cleveland unless I see it's George Pickens.
I'm starting him in Dynasty because that's my only option. My next to sit him of the week, it's tough. I said him last week. Might be the first player in the greatest podcast on turf history in the 3-year history to get sat in back-to-back videos.
No. There's no way.
I don't know, dude.
I literally sat Najee Harris last week.
Okay. You're okay. Hollywood Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, I know. I said sit him last week. He got you 8 points. You're not happy with 8, but you're not super pissed off. He had one rushing. He had a 30-yard run, which is where majority of his points came from. In the passing game, he had 5 targets with 3 catches for 28 yards. The Giants' defense kind of neutralized Dallas' offense a little bit last week. I mean, not neutralized, but they kind of held them.
I don't think Dallas... It was raining, and I don't think they were trying. I mean that in the most...
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. But at the same time... There's no way that Arizona is going to compete every week.
No.
I think there's a good chance Washington's just bad. Like, I think that there's a good chance, and I think that last week was probably the best it'll get for them this season. I'm confident in the Giants' defense. They made a bunch of off-season moves. They have all their guys signed under contract. Deonte Banks, first-round corner out of Maryland, looked pretty good against Dallas' receiving core. So I can only imagine how he's going to look this week against Arizona. So I'm saying sit Hollywood Brown for the 2nd week in a row.
My next sit-em receiver this week, it is Terry McLaurin going up against Denver. I know that Jacoby Myers popped off against Denver.
Yeah, he did.
However, Jacoby Myers isn't... I didn't watch that game, but Jacoby Myers isn't the number 1 for the Raiders. Obviously, it's Devontae Adams who didn't do much. And I think that Jahan Dotson has a better chance to pop off against Denver than Terry McLaurin. I also think there's a world where this game just sucks.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most realistic world. They're playing in Denver, so elevation's going to be there once again. Elevation matters. And both of these teams looked horrible last week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Washington barely beat the Arizona Cardinals, who are the worst team in football. Should be. And Denver is just Denver. So I don't think you drafted Terry McLaurin in that range where he's a verge starter.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit him this week.
Yeah. And my last sit-him receiver this week, this is probably kicking dog because I don't even think he had a catch. Drake London.
Yeah.
Guy had 2 targets throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
Didn't have a catch. That's a problem. And they're playing Green Bay this week, which is a pretty good defense, if I do say so myself.
A really damn good defense.
Best defense in the division, as Ryan always said. But yeah, I mean, until Desmond Ridder proves he's going to spread the ball around and the Falcons are not just going to be a run-first, run-heavy, 2 running back football team.
Run-only football team?
Yeah. I think you have to sit Drake London and arguably even Kyle Pitts. I mean, Kyle Pitts had 1 big catch at the end of the game that kind of helped him save his day. But other than that, they really didn't do much. So I would say until further notice and until we see something from Desmond Ridder and or Arthur Smith, who's calling this offense, you got to sit Drake London, man.
This is just the yearly reminder that situation matters in redraft.
Yeah.
Talent is almost second in terms of redraft because Kyle Pitts and Drake London have all the talent in the world. But they're not going to finish better than, I don't know, a Tyler Lockett.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tyler Lockett's a baller, so I probably shouldn't have said him. But
yeah, I mean,
it's the principle. You know, It's all about the situation. If they're in a bad situation, they're not going to do good.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to wrap up this week's Stardom Sit-em. Be sure to comment any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms you guys have below. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
See ya.
Peace.